Hey guys, what's going on? So today I'll be doing a guide for Full Cloth that will cover all of his abilities, introduce some strategies, and most importantly go over some buff methods. So before we go into the abilities, let's talk about the general playstyle for Full Cloth. Personally, I consider him a jack of all trades because he has sufficient neutral game and gets even better with melee and range thanks to the buffs he possesses. You're going to want to get used to using his buffs at the right moments, but we'll get into that later on. One last thing to mention is that he has body armor which deflects all beam attacks, but note that he can still take damage if struck with projectile abilities such as GPO3's rockets. The armor also will not refresh upon death if you're overcosted, so make sure you remember that because having armor on makes your approaches with melee a hell of a lot easier. Alright, now that I've talked about the general info, let's cover his abilities. Okay, so Full Cloth carries a crossbow that can be reloaded by pressing BC and can also release all remaining ammo by pressing AC. This weapon alone is what makes him able to deal consistent pressure to the opposite team. I suggest when in idle movement you always reload your crossbow because you never know if you're going to need extra shots to down an enemy or even to save your partner from taking a hit. A trick you can do to deal damage, quickly reload, or even dodge an incoming shot is to simply use neutral whip, quickly rainbow dash, and then do whatever you wish afterwards. But I really don't suggest beginners try this method if they're not really confident in their movements yet. One last thing to mention about the crossbow is to simply spam it to close the gap between you and the other team. You're given pretty much a blessing by being able to consistently shoot bullets at the other team, so take advantage of that. Moving on, let's talk about Full Cloth's whip. His whip is pretty much a melee suit's worst nightmare when buffed by a CSB and can also deal satisfying damage in the shape of a cone in front of him, which can make suits such as Epion his complete bitch when used in the right hands. You can also use the whip as a sort of combo finisher and can even use it to avoid taking damage from the enemy's partner because you'll be elevated into the air for a short period of time depending on how many launches you actually do. Alright, so next up is his burst attack, which launches a nuke slowly towards the enemy, and it has a pretty laughable startup time, so make sure you use it when you aren't locked onto by an enemy, and use it as an aerial summon in redlock range when the enemy is momentarily in the same area. This ensures decent tracking and a more accurate nuke. If the enemy is moving, the bomb will have a hard time arriving at the desired location. One last thing to mention is that by using a nuke, it blocks off movement options for the enemy and makes your job to dish out damage easier. Alright, now that I've covered the weapons for Full Cloth, we can start to talk about his buffs and the methods associated with them. So let's start off with his CSA, which enhances your range gain by a large amount, leaving you with 18 bullets to spam instead of 5. This buff will last for about 14 seconds, so you have some time to make a difference range-wise. When in this mode, your regular boost dash count will now be 8 instead of 6. Your crossbow also gains new functions to its AC by allowing you to rapidly speed out bullets in 3 different directions by inputting either up, left, or right with the AC button itself. I myself don't really rely on this and use it as a range combo finisher after landing one successful shot in order to quickly down an enemy and focus on the other. The next buff for Full Cloth is pretty much God mode, guys, if used correctly in the right hands, and can be activated by using his CSB, which will enhance his overall mobility and melee capabilities. Similar to his CSA, it turns your boost dash count from 6 to 8 and will last for about 14 seconds. When in this mode, your neutral whip will gain access to the anti-melee function I mentioned earlier, and once again can be used by pressing neutral whip plus left or right input directions. Alright, since we've covered all the abilities for Full Cloth, let's talk about buff strategies. Many people have been having debates that involve whether or not if you should use both buffs at the same time, or just use them individually depending on what you're trying to do. I myself just use both buffs because it enhances all aspects of the suit, and you also never know what will happen in a match. So I guess you can say I also do it for safety precautions as well. The cooldowns for the buffs don't really bother me that much due to his neutral game being sufficient enough to stall some time in order for the buffs to refresh. And since I apply both melee and range to make Full Cloth pretty much an ideal unit, I like to call this method the hybrid method. Now, if you prefer to use them individually, it can still be done, so you shouldn't really worry about it that much. After all, different team comps even make me think otherwise about using the hybrid method, and often forces me to switch to applying individual buffs. So now let's talk about applying individual buffs and start off with a scenario. So say you were facing a team of melee suits. You can take advantage of this situation and can kite them both with the help of your CSA. The amount of pressure done by you alone is pretty ridiculous. It can make the enemy team think twice before trying to melee you. But what if they caught up to you in close redlock range, right? That's when you activate your CSB and let your instincts kick in. This scenario alone was a bit of a passive approach, but if you choose to be more aggressive in meleeing, just make sure your partner can bail you out if you're in some deep trouble. Meleeing as full cloth while buffed is, kind of rapid, but also makes you a huge target to the other team. So make sure you're pretty safe when you choose to melee. So yeah guys, that just about covers the general information you need to know for full cloth. Next guide will be for Rosen, and if you would like a unit to be covered, just leave a comment down below for consideration. But yeah, as always, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, share it with your friends who are trying to learn full cloth, and I will see you guys later.